everyone. We are coming to you from Highway Harry's here in Johnson Creek. We're laughing about this because we're in a restaurant, and when we came in, we asked to be seated, near the back so we could do this recording. But this works for us because, we don't live in the same place. So we decided to not do a Zoom recording this time to
actually see one another in person.
So we are, hanging out with the folks at lunch hour at Highway Harry's here. If you know where that is in Wisconsin, then you come on over sometime.
Yes, but then you know all the best places in Wisconsin if you know where Highway Harry's is.
So today we're bringing you part six of our plotting series, our novel writing but plotting series.
Yes.
That's what we're calling it,
yes.
right?
Yes.
And part 6 is going to talk about novel endings. Mm-hmm. So we've covered beginnings, we've covered messy middle, we've talked about hooks and inciting incidents. We've gone through all these different things, but now we're talking about endings.
The end. Yes.
And as writers, this is trickier than readers. I mean,
yes.
Readers are very particular about their endings. And
yes.
There are many times when I have read a book and not appreciated the ending.
Yes, the art to the end.
Yeah. So I think we can all think of books that we wished had ended it differently.
Absolutely.
And then there's books that have stuck with us, that the ending, either because it just makes us keep thinking, or maybe it was so heart-wrenching. So there's definitely books that, or maybe the ending was so beautiful.
The ending was so beautiful, and it's sort of, it's a tragedy in its own way because you want to stay in the story.
Yeah.
You don't want it to end because you've enjoyed it so much, and it feels like you're not any longer in that place or with those characters. You don't want it to end, but everything needs an ending.
Well, and that's the kind of writer we all aspire to be.
We always aspire to be. Yes.
If we could.
Yes.
So we're going to walk through novel endings today. Now, there's some particular types, and we're going to just kind of walk through each one and where you might use them, what type of books you use them for, and then the tricky things about each one. And we'll use some examples here and there, too, as we think of it. So why don't you start with the first one?
Okay.
Because I know that you use this a lot in your writing.
Yes, I always seek the happily ever after. I always seek the restored order. I always seek people to get justice who deserve it.
Sure.
It's just part of my nature. I write cozies, I write romantic comedies. I want that happy ending. And I understand it's not real life, but that's the point.
Oh, that's okay. That's why I like books with happily ever after.
Yeah.
So sometimes if you're writing, you might see this abbreviated HEA.
Happily
ever after. Sometimes you might see happily ever after for now, which is also a thing, where it's a series, maybe you're going to have some ongoing storylines.
Yeah, and
right?
that's a wonderful hook, happily ever after for now. And as a reader, you want to jump into the next one and say, okay, what's going to happen to my favorite character? I want to know. So, usually for romance or a cozy mystery, traditional standalone novel, last one in the series, it resolves the major conflict, wraps up subplots, ties up any loose ends you may have, and it answers your lingering questions. So that's your happily ever after ending to a story, and probably the most popular one.
I think it is.
Okay.
I think it is. I mean, well, it's maybe the most. It's for me the one I like to read the most. Mm-hmm. I like to write these as well, although I'm testing the waters with some other endings just lately with other types of books. But and this works best. I mean, it's going to be a requirement if you're writing romance. This is a requirement of the romance genre or trope that you have a happily ever after, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The happily ever after, you know where you're sort of headed, but it's not to be confused with a story that's always a happy story.
Correct.
There's a lot. You have to have all the other things that go into it that make you kind of earn that happy.
You're going to have your tension, your conflict, the dark moment for your main character to move through. You're going to have those things moving toward that payoff in the end.
Very much so.
Yeah.
But yeah, so these are the books that I pick up for just the pure pleasure of it, the happily ever afters.
Right.
I am a romance novel reader, so not a writer, but a reader. Okay, so number 2 is the one that we often enjoy reading as well, the twist or surprise ending. Mm-hmm. Now, the tricky thing here for this is that you have to foreshadow that twist somewhat.
Right, because if readers will respond quite strongly if all of a sudden there's no setup for this twist and it comes out of nowhere and it feels like the reader gets cheated because I just the asteroid hits the earth in the end and came out of nowhere, right? That's kind of unfair to the reader.
Yeah, and I joke with this. I joke with students. I teach a lot of middle grade writing workshops, and I'm like, you cannot make your story end with "it was just a dream," or they all woke up in the end, and So I challenge them and say, don't do that to us. Pretty please, don't do that to us.
But that leads me to my very favorite ending in the
Oh no, was
entire
it a
world.
dream?
No, my very favorite ending as a writer, and the best ending ever, is Midsummer Night's Dream when Puck says, "If you don't like it, it was all a dream."
That is a good ending.
Right?
That is a good ending.
What a way out. Disqualified with, if you don't like it, it was just a dream. If you liked it, well, here we are. Well,
Yes.
there's more where that came from.
Oh God, you're right.
That's my favorite ending ever.
Well, and then I'm thinking too of, oh gosh, I'm not going to remember the title of this in movie form. The movie where Bruce Willis is actually, okay, this isn't a spoiler. This has been out, Sixth Sense. It's been out forever. So if you haven't seen it, you cannot blame us for the spoiler.
Yeah, that one's a famous one.
So, but he's actually dead through the whole movie.
Yeah.
And it's never addressed. But there's enough clues. Yes. No one ever interacts with him, except for the little boy who can see dead people, right?
Right.
And so it's satisfying in that the clues are there. We just don't pick up on them until we're kind of told. I mean, maybe some people did pick up on it.
There might have been an odd camera shot that you would look at and go, okay, what? They don't seem to be on the same plane.
Right.
They were there, right? But
and he's in the house with his wife, but they never interact.
And you just assume, there's this open space that as a viewer, you insert, it just means they're in a different room or something.
Right.
You connect the dots as the viewer. You're not aware that, okay, that's there on purpose.
Right.
Unless you're really astute.
I mean, so the cinematography was really good in that one, which we can't rely on necessarily as writing. We have to describe all the cinematography. So a twist, surprise ending, you've got to have still a satisfying ending. Mm-hmm. The surprise cannot come out of nowhere, and the twist has to make sense also for your character. It can't be out of character, at least what you've known about the character, what has been presented about the character. Right. Okay, so why don't you do the next one?
I'm sorry, I had a mint before this started. Which anybody in TV production would say you shouldn't do that. So I'm sorry. Circular perfect loop, best for character-driven novels or literary novels. So that circular, we were talking about that earlier.
Yeah.
The circular loop, for you to set up something in the very beginning, an incident, a moment, I don't want to give away what we're talking about. But, something that happens in that very first chapter, and then all of a sudden you revisit that at the end.
Yes. And it's also very satisfying to write.
Yes.
So I just finished my first ever attempt at a murder mystery has gone out to beta readers. And I was able to do this circular scene, basically. Mm-hmm. And I always knew I was going to do it, sort of in the back of my head. But when it was finally on paper, I was so pleased with what that felt like.
Yes.
To come back to the beginning. And they always say that, to kind of, that it's definitely a good literary device.
Yes.
It's just circle all the way back to the beginning. But you're looking at it from a different perspective by then, because you've been through all the elements of the book, all of the plot.
And then things seem to make sense. For example, if you brought up questions in the very, very beginning, which we should bring up a story question in the very beginning, and then all of a sudden, as you move through that last chapter or those last moments of the book, the answers are revealed for you to make the connections, right? Okay, right. This is what that meant.
And you're not over-explaining.
Right. No.
Because we got to trust our readers.
Right.
Yeah. So that is the circular or the perfect loop, story ending.
Yes.
So we talk about that with literary novels, character-driven novels. That is a very, very good ending, type of ending.
Right. I think it's effective for your story. I think it's effective to show your skill as a writer, and I think it's effective for the reader. Yeah,
very much so. Okay, so this other one's kind of fun, and I think you kind of love or hate these, and it probably just depends on the how well it's executed, right? Yes. So we've got the interpretive, ambiguous, or vague ending. So best for literary novels, pretty much. Yeah. Or sometimes suspense. Would they do that in suspense?
Sure.
Maybe. Psychological thriller, actually. I could see some of those having, you may have, there may be some lingering questions in some of those.
There may be some lingering questions, and I don't know how, Lee Child said that he left one of his books open-ended or vague, and I think that's the one he got the most negative responses for.
People don't like it.
People didn't like it. So, you do want some sense of answers or justice or feeling that something was resolved.
I think about this too, is that, why we read. Why do we pick up books? We're looking to be entertained, but, it's kind of nice. Like, there's so many things that are out of our control.
Yes.
That I think that we like it when a story is, really wrapped up.
Yes. And you feel it, you have it as a reader, you want that emotional connection to the book. You want to have some say in how these characters end up, I think.
Right.
Or at least it's a satisfying ending to what you've just done, which is read the book.
Right.
You get a satisfying payoff from finishing the book.
Exactly. Which I think we owe our readers.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yes. They bought the book. We
Yes.
owe them that. So thank you, readers. Thank you, dear readers. So the facts. So just to describe this a little better, the facts may be clear. Like, you're being told a particular ending, but there's room for interpretation, and you may end up talking about it with other people. These are books where you go, did this mean what it meant? There's maybe forums even online. Often, that might happen more with a movie that ends that way, where people are like, wait, what did the ending of that really mean?
Right.
And there may be a deeper meaning there, and then people debate about it, which is wonderful.
Right. Because to get that buzz about your story, about your writing technique, about how your characters resolved an issue, that's something that you love to hear.
Very much so. I hope so.
Yeah. This speaks to the Midsummer Night's Dream to me, because that's me, right?
So the two samples that were given as I was kind of looking through materials for this, Dexter by Jeff Lindsay, is that the book that started the Dexter series?
I believe so, yes.
That would make sense.
Yes.
Okay. And then The Giver by Lois Lowry. Now, Lois Lowry is a beautiful writer. I love all of her books. And I think that makes sense. The Giver is sort of a unique, story, and the ending doesn't really give us a complete resolution. Partial.
Yeah.
Partial.
Very honest, right? Because life rarely gives us a resolution to things.
Which is also why I think we gravitate toward happily ever after stories or the
Exactly.
circular ending.
Exactly.
Please give me some control, at least in my entertainment.
Number 5 would be the expanded ending, the epilogue. So when there is more to say. So if you're ending it at a certain point, it could be a saga, for example.
Right.
And then you're moving on to another era in this character's world.
That would work.
Right.
Yep.
So most editors would say don't do it. Tie up the loose ends.
Right.
And be careful you're not just compensating for a weak or underwritten ending.
That's true. Right. So, I mean, if you feel the need to go, okay, the book ended, but there's more the reader needs to know.
Yeah.
I think if you're at that point as a writer, you need to ask yourself whether you did your job with your ending.
Yeah.
I think you have to be very deliberate in choosing to do an epilogue.
Yeah.
I think sometimes I've been seeing them more and more in like romance series where it's more like a bonus chapter.
Yes.
As you kind of move on and summarize, they have children, yada, yada. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of them, but sometimes when they're done perfectly well, like they have an impact.
They haven't.
They're impactful and they enhance the experience of reading the book. They don't detract from it.
Right, because I think if it's well done and you're left with some sort of satisfaction at the end of the story, yet, and then this chapter of their lives opened.
Yeah. Yep.
And if you've enjoyed it a lot, you want to move into that next chapter of their lives.
Well, and I think that can work well, particularly if you have a series out. So any of you are like doing rapid release and multiple books in a series, then you have that spot where then the person can purchase the next book or order the next book if it's not out yet, too.
Right.
So from a marketing perspective, it can work
yes.
As well to kind of lead you in.
Yes.
So one of my most favorite books is The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. And if you know that book at all, you know that Death is the narrator of that book, which is an interesting narrator. If you don't know the story, look it up. It's a World War II era novel, follows a little girl who has come to live with a family. And her name's Liesel. And the epilogue is Death following her through her life. And as she becomes an old lady, and he's a little bit in love with her in a way, like he's appreciated her humanity. And so the last line, this is from Death, a last note from your narrator: I am haunted by humans. And that's kind of like, we'll talk about ending lines at the end of this discussion, but wow, that's a really interesting ending line. So.
And it's true. I mean, because, and I think of C.S. Lewis and the Screwtape Letters.
Yes.
Right? And writing it from that different perspective, from, a devil's perspective is a fascinating way to tell a story, to describe human beings.
Yeah.
Innovative. I don't, maybe innovative is the wrong word, but very interesting way to do it.
And also difficult writing.
Yeah.
Right?
Black is white, white is black. Everything's split.
And we are used to having, someone that's involved in the scene, not so much the omniscient narrator.
Yeah.
Not everybody chooses to write an omniscient narrator like that.
Especially from a
like
devil's perspective
exactly.
as the omniscient narrator. Right. Yeah, it's a risk, but it
I
works.
need to read the Screw Tape Letters again.
Oh, it's fabulous.
Oh my gosh, see, you learn about these. The
Yeah.
stack of books that is waiting for me,
pile.
I know, it's horrible.
Me too.
Okay, so the sixth type of ending is cliffhanger. Ooh, this is tricky. This is tricky because you don't want to upset your readers by not giving them a good conclusion. So this is mostly used in books that are parts of series, but not the final book in the series. And it is really, I guess, the most controversial type of ending just because people don't like them very much.
Right.
Excuse me.
It's one thing, to have it in a TV show, a cliffhanger, because who shot JR, right? I mean, that was the ultimate
Who
cliffhanger.
did shoot JR? No, sorry.
It was the one, Denise, right?
Right.
And she did, I'm sorry if you've never seen it. Forgot I said that. And that it's different. You'll get it the next week in a TV show. A cliffhanger is completely different. But in a book, you're thinking like, okay, when will I ever get to see what happens?
Yeah, and I have a word of warning about that. So I had a friend who had a mystery out, and she planned to write a multi-book series, and then life got in the way.
Mm-hmm.
So the first book came out. She got a BookBub deal without the second book being available.
Oh.
And oh my goodness, all these people bought the book because of the BookBub deal, and she got terrible reviews because they were mad about the cliffhanger.
Yeah.
There wasn't enough satisfying moment.
Yeah.
Not enough was wrapped up. So there's a balance there to wrap up enough things, but leave enough, still open, in terms of the plot that a series can continue.
Right. So
series writing, that's a very different type of plotting.
Right. Right. So you want to give the key, I think, is to give the reader enough information so that they can take away some sense of satisfaction, the world is restored,
Yes.
and then be interested in what happens next.
Right. Or they will get mad at you, and they will be vicious. It's very true.
But we're too nice for that. So please don't.
Please don't do that to us. No, we are not writing. I'm not writing cliffhangers. Are you writing cliffhangers? No, we're okay. So just a word of warning. You've been warned. You've been warned. The last one, we were talking about this before we set up the computer here to record today. We don't see a lot of this anymore. The moral of the story, or books that give us sort of like a moral takeaway or a lesson learned. Maybe picture books. Sometimes. I mean, you think about fables. Fables always did that.
Yeah, they would.
I mean, we were joking a little bit about mysteries, like murder mysteries, where the bad guy's caught or the villain's always caught. That we thought that was it's a moral lesson. Don't kill people.
Yeah. So there's one. It just happens that when I write, I know, and I don't set out this way, but a theme always bubbles to the top when I'm writing something. So obviously in a murder, it's don't. Thou shalt not kill. But there's always something else that comes up when I'm writing. And oftentimes, I don't know why this is, but I come back to this theme of knowing oneself.
Oh, there you go.
And I don't feel that that's too preachy for people. I think it's a valuable takeaway when people are listening to my characters talk, and you have, questioning who are you? Why are you doing this? Questioning your motivation. So that comes in. When I'm writing, that just happens to be included in the themes of my work. But I don't set out to say, oh, I'm going to preach to you about. Yeah,
you're not being morally preachy, or you're just it's a character trait, or it's a theme.
It's a theme
within
that comes to the top, and I think
through your characters.
Through the characters, and I think most people's books do that. Mm-hmm. If you look at it from a academic perspective, and you look for symbols, and you look for motivation and signs, I think it's in there. Mm-hmm. But in general, you have to kind of look for it, which is a good thing.
I think so too, and I realize that something that happens in the same way is I have a lot of trust your instinct themes.
There you go. Great.
Yep.
And that's a moral, so to speak. Trust your instinct.
It is. Believe
in what you suspect, because in general, your hunches are correct.
Right. Believe in yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it ends up in the same place sometimes. So. Yeah. A lot of these lists that you're going to see, and then we're going to link to some of these things too in the blog post, is they say there are 6 types of endings, and the 7th type of ending here is this moral, story key takeaway. So we've got 7 today. And then there are the combination ones where you will see a happily ever after combined with like the full circle type of ending, or a twist with the circular ending, or a cliffhanger as well as a twist. But again, with the word of warning to have that cliffhanger not be.
Right.
Don't let everything be on the cliff.
Yes.
Resolve some of those things.
Right.
So.
And I love this happily ever after, HEA, that's circular. So it's happily ever after, and it's still at the same time you've come back to the beginning and you're reflecting something that was a question to start with.
Right.
Or a dilemma a character was fighting through, and they managed to do it while living happily ever after.
Right.
I think that's extremely satisfying.
It's very satisfying. And you come back to the spot where you pretty much started, only your character has changed and made progress, and you know, they're not, damaged at the end. They're like, well, maybe there was damage in the middle.
But they worked through it, and they're okay now. They're better off.
I really do like happily ever after stories. We talk about first lines way back. We talk about beginnings. So we're talking about endings here, but that last line is tricky. There were some tips. Make that last line so great that the reader needs to immediately, they want to go back and reread the whole book. If I ever succeed in that, I mean, I don't know if I have. Nobody's ever said I wanted to go back and reread the whole thing. I'd have to look at my reviews. I don't like to read my reviews very much. But that's winning. You've won as a writer at that point. Your authorship is whole, complete. You've got the badge. You've got the badge of honor.
Yeah, and a trick to that to me would be to pull out, like when you're writing your book and you have some standout sound bites, if you will, right? In the press, they'd call it a sound bite. Pull those out, right? As you're writing, I literally do this. I keep a list of standout lines.
The really good lines.
The really good lines.
Oh, that's an interesting technique.
Yeah.
I like that.
And then I go back at the end and I refresh my mind with some of those lines. And is there any one of these I can revisit? And answer the question, reflect it, expand on it, and deliver that punchline home.
Right. That's fun. That's fun, especially when you type that last line and you've been very deliberate about having picked it out.
Right.
The other thing that last line can do and should do if it's part of a series is to hook the reader into wanting to get that next book.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Or if they just loved your writing so much that even if it's standalone, that they want your next book that isn't even part of the same character group or anything. And then leave your reader thinking about the book, about the story. Mm-hmm. There's books that have echoed like that for me, like where you think a long time after about the book.
A number of Nelson DeMille books, The Gold Coast. I've read that book over and over. It's so well done for so many reasons. There's so many layers to the narrative. Yeah. And I think that's, to me, the key is if you can layer in themes in your narrative, layer in the story, layer in the whodunit, and then layer in some kind of moral overtone, like knowing yourself or trusting your instinct. That if you can wrap all that up neatly in a final chapter and a last paragraph, that keeps me thinking about the book.
Right, and it resonates with the people. Yeah, and I think too the book that Kristen Hanna's Firefly Lane, which is big on Netflix right now because all of the episodes are out. So I will not give it away, but read the book first, always. And I was trying to tell my husband about the ending of that. He was gone, and then I binged it, which, happens because it wouldn't have been his type of story anyway. Yeah. And it was the ending was just so beautifully fitting, the overall, the whole friendship story of these girls that grew up together on Firefly Lane and then stayed friends throughout their adulthood. I started to cry when I was telling him about this. Because it was just such a beautiful ending. Oh my gosh, I went through so many Kleenexes.
Oh, that's an ending.
Right, yes. Right. And the book is that way too. I mean, I'm watching the movie. Yeah. I'm watching the episodes on Netflix. But, oh my goodness, right? So if we can do that with our endings.
Right. Then we've done
I want to make people cry. I also want to make people happy. But
don't
whatever.
cry after this ending. When we end
no,
please don't go away and cry.
We're really sorry.
Yes.
So is there anything else you want to add, or do we think that we can recap? So we have 7 here. We've got the happily ever after ending, the twist or surprise ending, the circular perfect loop ending, the ambiguous, vague, the ending that you might interpret different ways, The epilogue or expanded ending, where you add something after the last chapter. The cliffhanger, which we have lots of words of warning about. And then the moral of the story, or, a moral takeaway or a life lesson type thing.
Right. So what's the moral of this story? What's the moral of this?
Do we have a moral of the story? The moral of the story is pick your ending well.
Pick your ending well.
Pick your ending carefully.
And if you don't like it, it was all a dream.
It was all a dream. No.
If you don't like
everyone was actually dead. No, I'm just kidding. It's bad. All right, thanks you guys. We'll be back with episode 7 later this summer.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
So thanks for hanging out with us.
Here is to writing endings, and may you all write happily ever after.
Yes, there you go. All right.